The Quran. 1. Was the Quran directly revealed by God or chosen by man? 2. Has the Quran been perfectly preserved or has it changed over the centuries? Torpedo 2. Archaeological evidence. The manuscripts. Despite the claims of the Sin, there are no manuscripts with all 114 surahs or chapters of the Quran that can be conclusively dated to the time of Uthman, that is AD 652. In contrast, for the New Testament, we have nearly 6,000 original Greek manuscripts, with the earliest fragment dating to about 50 years after it was originally written, that is the John Rylands fragment. Muslim apologists point to the fact that the earliest complete Greek New Testament manuscripts are from the 4th century, that is 300 years after Jesus, and they claim that Christians face the same 300-year gap as Muslims. But there is a simple solution. Because the earliest New Testament manuscripts were written on a paper-like material called papyrus, which is perishable, which means it did not last. And the reason for this is because the early church could not use non-perishable materials like parchment or treated animal skin, as it was too expensive. In addition, for the first 300 years of church history, there were regular persecutions of Christians by Roman emperors, who destroyed many copies of the New Testament. By the 4th century, Christians had gained enough political power and finance to have parchment manuscripts that did last. And this is why the first complete Greek New Testament manuscripts on parchment are from the 4th century. But Islam does not have this excuse, because the standard Islamic narrative claims that the Muslims conquered the Middle East in a few decades. They would have had no problem producing complete Qurans on parchment that we could look at today. But the most complete one they have is the Topkapi manuscript, which has more than 90% of the Quran, but it's from the 8th century. The earliest one we have is the Sana'a manuscript, which is probably late 7th century, but there are at least two problems. A. It's only a handful of verses, that is about 10% of the Quran. And B. It's also a palimpsest, which means that there was an earlier text that was completely erased and the same skin was used again to write a completely different text over the top of it. Using UV light, we can see the underlayer. But this raises an important question. Why would you erase an entire manuscript of the eternal, complete, revealed word of Allah and start again? Let's examine the manuscripts and see if we can find a complete copy from Uthman that is from 652. First, let's look at the Topkapi. It is 90% of the Quran, but it's from the 8th century and it's not Uthmanic. According to the famous Muslim scholar Dr. Tayyar al-Tukulich, says, quote, "Even though we would like to publish this sacred text as the Mushaf of Caliph Uthman, our research indicated that it is neither the private Mushaf of Caliph Uthman nor one of the Mushafs he sent to various centers." The Samarkand manuscript is also mid-8th century. It is not Uthmanic. It only goes to Surah 43. There are different writing styles with copyist errors. The Mail is also late 8th century. It's not Uthmanic. It's only 53% of the Quran. The Al-Huzayni manuscript is also mid-8th century, and according to Al-Tukulich, it is not Uthmanic. The Parisino Petropolitanus has been dated to early 8th century, but there are corrections to the text. It disagrees with the 1924 Cairene Mushaf in 93 places, and it's only 26% of the Quran. Finally, there's the Sana'a palimpsest that was discussed earlier. As we noted, it's a palimpsest with an upper and lower text with significant differences between the two. The lower text has only 63 verses out of 6,236 verses totally in the Quran. That's only about 10%. Also, it's dated to about 705, that is early 8th century. Summarizing Torpedo 2, early Quranic manuscripts. None of them are from the 7th century. The earliest is 705, that is the early 8th century. None of them are complete. None have 114 chapters of today's Quran. None of them completely agree with each other, and none of them completely agree with the current 1924 Hafs text, which is standard for more than 90% of Muslims across the world. All of them have manuscript variants, and these variants are consonantal or rasm variants, not diacritical marks. This means that they can potentially change the meanings of the verses. So none of them are examples of a text that goes back to Uthman in 652. So none of them support the standard Islamic narrative. Conclusion, Torpedo 2 scores a direct hit. Not so fast. The Islamic Awareness website claims that they have 96% of the Quran from before AD 719. But closer analysis reveals the following. Number 1, they don't have one single manuscript with 96% of the Quran, but 63 fragments with the verses added together to get this figure of 96%. Some of the fragments only have a few verses. 2, 9 are dated to after 719, they're the blue arrows. 3. 20 are only tentatively dated, with scholars disagreeing on the dates. They're the green arrows. And 4. 34 have not been studied. They're the red arrows. So we have no way of knowing what the dates actually are. So any claims that they are before 719 are pure speculation by Muslims. This confirms that there is no manuscript evidence for one complete Quran from the 7th century. Torpedo 2 still scores a direct hit.